Crazy faith. This has been a good series. I love seeing how you guys have stepped out in your faith. This first week of the series, we talked about crazy serving. If you'll remember that, we challenged you to participate in our Engage Our City event, and over 500 people across both of our campuses participated in a crazy serving. So again, thank you so much for those of you who participated in that. We also did 7 days of crazy praying as well, where we dedicated an entire week of praying for our city, and to watch you guys pray, that was a blessing. Last week, Doyle did a great job of talking about what it looks like to have a crazy generosity, a heart that wants to give and be generous towards this community and this church and all that God is doing all around the world. And today we're going to put a capstone on it by talking about something that is potentially even more crazier than those three things combined. In fact, we're going to combine those three things and talk about the fact that Jesus calls us to be crazy continually in all three of those things. And here's what I mean. Jesus is asking us to not just be crazy once, but to be crazy continually and to commit to having a crazy life. You see, serving, praying, and giving one time, there's nothing crazy about that. If you serve one time and you dedicate one weekend to serving people, that's not crazy. You know what that is? That's normal. That's typical. That's what the world does. Jesus says, I call you to make that part of a lifestyle. Praying, everybody prays once, even those who don't believe. Many of them, on occasion, will pray once when things get tough. But Jesus says, I'm asking you to commit to praying regularly. Giving, everybody gives once to some cause. Whether it be a disaster in the world, they're like, you know what? I'll be generous this once and I'll text in some money. But what Jesus calls us to do is to be generous continually. And so today what I want to do is I want to call you to a crazy faith. And that starts by making a crazy commitment to regularly praying, regularly giving, and regularly serving. And I want to use this passage in Luke chapter 14. So grab your Bibles, open up to Luke chapter 14. We're going to look at a message of Jesus here, a conversation that Jesus has with a group of people. And he says some crazy stuff in here, like really crazy things as he's calling them to a crazy commitment. Luke chapter 14, starting with verse 25. I'm going to read the whole thing together, and then we'll parse it out, and I'll give you some wisdom and guidance on what Jesus is saying here. It says this, Now great crowds accompanied Jesus, and he turned and said to them, If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. That's crazy. If you were listening to a word I said there, if you were listening to a word Jesus says here, you're like, Jesus, that is a crazy thing to say. What Jesus is doing is he's calling us to a crazy faith. Specifically, he's talking to a crowd of people. And the first thing that we're going to see in this passage is that the first crazy thing he's asking this crowd to do is to step out of the crowd. To step out of the crowd. And I think that's the very first thing that we need to do if we're going to have a crazy faith. Jesus says this. It says this when he's talking about this whole parable, this metaphor that he's given. It says, Now great crowds accompanied him. Everywhere Jesus went, there was thousands of people that were coming after him. And Jesus wanted to call them out of the crowd to something more. He says there's great crowds accompanying them, but what I want you to be is my disciple. I want you to step out of the crowd and step into being a disciple of mine, a close follower of mine, a learner of me. And essentially what Jesus does on the in-between is he says, I want you to separate yourself into two groups. And he's talking to the great crowd. He turns to them, he says, separate yourself into two groups. I want crowd people here, disciple people here. Now, how do you think they determined whether or not they were part of the crowd or disciple? I'm guessing some of you are beginning to do that. Am I part of the crowd? I'm in a crowd. Am I part of the crowd? Or am I really a disciple of Jesus? You know, the difference between a crowd person and a disciple person has nothing to do with proximity to Jesus. And some of us think, well, I'm close to Jesus. I came to church. I mean, how close do you get, right? That must mean that I'm a disciple. Well, the crowd was close to Jesus too. It had nothing to do with holiness. The disciples weren't more holy than everybody else in the world. You know what the difference between someone in the crowd versus someone who was a disciple is? The difference was commitment. That was the difference. The disciples were committed. They stepped out of the crowd and they said, you know what? We'll give up parts of our life to follow you, Jesus. We'll give up our careers. We'll give up our homes. We'll go on the road and follow you. We're committed to that. You know what the crowd wanted? The crowd wanted Jesus and the blessings that come with Jesus without actually committing to Jesus. They were okay following Jesus until Jesus asked them to do something difficult. And so the question is, how do we know that we're committed? And so Jesus tells them, this is how you know you're committed. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. The litmus test for being a disciple was, for Jesus, you got to hate your family. Like if you want to be a disciple, you have to hate your family. Now I know what some of you are thinking right now. I must be a disciple. Like that man, I hate him. That mother-in-law, oh, she gets under my kids. Like it was a rough morning for some of you, wasn't it? And you're like, I must be a true disciple of Jesus right now. Now, what you need to understand is Jesus isn't really asking you to hate them. He's using hyperbole. In fact, what he's doing is he's examining and evaluating the Jewish culture that he's talking to. In the Jewish culture, you know what they put most honor in? They put most honor in family. Now, God was above family for a good Jewish person, but below that was family. They gave everything. They gave full honor and commitment to being a part of a family. To be dismissed from a family was a big disgrace. To not have a family, to be a widow or someone who wasn't able to have kids, you were looked down upon because family was like king in the Jewish culture. Like for a good Jewish person, family was above career. Like if your career got in the way of family, you sacrificed career. Family was above money and finances. You would care for your parents when they're elderly, no matter what it cost. For a good Jewish person, family was above love, which is why the mother and father could choose the husband for their daughter. And the daughter would give way to that and say, I want to honor my parents, and if you think this is what's best, then I'm going to set aside love and step into this. And I'm trying to convince my girls that this is still the way to do things. I'm not sure they're convinced, though. But for a Jewish person, family first. And so what Jesus does is he's not really asking them to hate. What he's asking them to do is to evaluate where they put their value. Jesus says, whatever you value the most, and in this Jewish culture, it was father, mother, wife, brother, sister, children. We value those most. Jesus says it's okay to value those. It's okay to honor those. In fact, in other places of his teachings, he commands us to value family and to honor family. But what he's saying here is, you better value me way more than those. If you're going to follow me, if you're going to be a disciple of mine, like put family at a high place. It's okay to value your career. It's okay to value your income. It's okay to value your family. But when it comes to me, I'm asking to be top dog above all of it. To the point where the gap is so big that it looks like you don't even value that at all. And so the question we need to ask if we're going to step out of the crowd is not, do I hate my family? But the question is, what do I value most in life? And have I put Jesus to a point above that where it appears that I'm not even interested in those other things? So what is it in our culture that we value? I think we value our time and we value our dollars. I think that's what we value. So the question I would have is, when you look at those two things, is Jesus above those? Is he above those? Like when the IRS processed your tax return this year, did the IRS look at what you gave to other people and the donations that you made, and did they say, does this person even want a paycheck? Why are they giving this amount away? Why are they giving that big of a percent away? Do they even love getting paid? Of course we love getting paid. But you know what we love more? Jesus. We're okay with giving to others and benefiting others. If I were to look at your calendar this upcoming week, would I think you were crazy about Jesus? Or would I think you were crazy about your career, crazy about sports, crazy about school? What would I think that you were crazy about? For some of you, like one of the big things in our community is families value sports, and we put that at such a high level, and our kids got to be involved in everything. And the question I've got to ask you is, what does your coach of that sport think that you value most? Do you value that team, or do you value Jesus? Because sometimes we're willing to sacrifice Jesus to be a part of these other things and say, I would never sacrifice practice, I'd never sacrifice tournament, I would never sacrifice game, I would never sacrifice work. But I would sacrifice Jesus to do those things. But I love him above all things. What Jesus is calling us to do is to put him higher than all of those things and step out of the crowd and become a disciple. Now, the biggest difference between the crowd and a disciple is that the crowd wanted to be blessed by Jesus, but wasn't really interested in sticking with Jesus. They wanted the blessings of Jesus, but they weren't interested in sticking with him. Maybe a more crude way to put it is that they wanted to be in bed with Jesus without actually committing to Jesus. And in fact, the Old Testament uses that metaphor and that picture a lot. That we want to be in bed with God. We want the blessings of God. We want the goodies of God, but we don't want to commit to it. And Jesus comes along and says, if you like it, I'm asking you to put a ring on it. Like, you can't just get the goodies without the commitment. You got to have the commitment as well. And so Jesus says, commit to not just being in the crowd, but commit to stepping out of the crowd and following me. But then Jesus says this, if you're going to put a ring on it, know that the ring's going to cost you. Know that it's going to be a costly ring. And that's the second thing he tells the crowd here, is he says, I'm asking you to step out of the crowd, put me over you, but then I want you to do this. I want you to count the cost. And this is the cost that he says it's going to cost. He says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. He says there's the crowd and there's disciples, and the bridge from being a crowd to a disciple is to pick up your cross and follow me. And the cross is the bridge of how we step out, and that cross is it's a symbol of sacrifice. It's a symbol of commitment to the relationship, even though there's a sacrifice involved. And Jesus says, there's a cost to following me. And he says, for which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and it is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. I mean, we know people like that, right? It's probably most of the men in this room. We start projects without counting the cost first, and then we have to keep running to Home Depot until we just say, you know what, the project's done, I'll finish it next year. And it never gets done, does it? You still have things in your house that are not done because your husband did not count the cost. And Jesus says, I don't want that for my kingdom. I don't want you to step into this and not count the cost and then not finish the race. He says, if you're going to follow me, you have to sit down and count the cost. Jesus uses the metaphor of a builder, but in my family, what we're struggling with right now is puppy. My middle daughter, Ara, she is trying to convince me to get our home a puppy. She is all about the puppy life. She thinks she would be a great puppy mom. She's never owned a puppy, so she doesn't know. She thinks she's counted the cost, and she's begging. Like, every time she sees someone walking their dog on the side of the road, she'll like snap a picture of it and then text it to me and say, doesn't this person look so happy? We could be in a happy family too if we had a puppy. Or she'll go to her friend's house and play with a puppy and then tell me all these great puppy stories. And she says, Dad, can we please get a puppy? Every single day she's saying, please get a puppy. But I've counted the cost, and I know it costs a lot to have a puppy. Anybody here count the cost and said, no puppy for us? Okay, I'm not alone. There's a few of you here. But the thing is, like, she doesn't know that. She thinks she's willing to pay the cost. But I'm not so sure, because I don't think she understands what else comes with a puppy. Anybody like getting their stuff chewed up? No, I don't like, that's a cost of owning a puppy. There's hair everywhere when you own a puppy. I have 3 girls in my family with a lot of hair. My drains can't handle any more hair in my home. That's a cost that I've counted, and it's not one we're gonna commit to, right? Dogs poop everywhere, and they don't care. I've got a 6-year-old son who does that. I don't need I don't need something else living with me that does that as well. I've counted the cost, and I'm not sure that my family can make that commitment, but my daughter, she looks at it. She's like, I know. She's like, it's worth it. And I think that's what Jesus expects us to do, is to sit down and at least have that conversation. Before we jump in and we jump into this commitment with Jesus, just to sit down with Jesus. Maybe sit down as a family, or to sit down as roommates in our home or our apartment and just say, what is it gonna cost us to follow Jesus long term? And I think what some of us need to do is we need to budget our life in Christ. We're really good at doing that with our paycheck, some of us, where every payday we'll sit down and we'll determine these are the most important things in our life that we need to put money towards college education in the future, or towards retirement, or towards savings, or towards generosity and what Jesus is doing here. And we do that with our finances. I think we need to do that with our time as well. And we need to sit down in a family and say, we served once. Maybe Jesus is calling us to commit to doing that regularly. What would it look like to not just to attend church, but to be the hands and feet of Jesus at church? Is it possible that maybe we could go to a service and then serve in kids' ministry beforehand or afterhand? Or maybe we could be part of the food pantry and dedicate continual, regular time to serving Jesus. Or maybe I don't just pray when something bad happens. What would it look if we as a family sat down and committed to, we're gonna give our mornings away to just praying and sitting in the presence of Jesus? Or we're gonna dedicate Sundays, because no matter what comes up, the school's gonna try to take it, sport's gonna try to take it, the vacation's gonna try to take it. What if we came and just said, this is Jesus' time, and we commit to counting the cost and then giving it over to him? And when you sit down to budget your life and budget those different areas, you need to understand that Jesus isn't asking you to get the one-time purchase. Jesus is asking for a lifetime subscription. That's what he's asking for. He wants a lifetime subscription of you praying to him, of you serving others, of you being generous. In Luke 9, just a few chapters before this, Jesus said something similar about taking up your cross. But to that crowd, he said, if you're gonna follow me, I'm asking you to take up your cross daily and follow me, to get the subscription. This isn't a one-time, I've sacrificed once and so now me and Jesus are tight kind of thing. I'm sacrificing daily. I'm committing to this, and I'm committing to the cost of what it means. And one of the things that we need to understand that Jesus is doing is not really necessarily asking us to commit to the sacrifice. Jesus isn't just trying to hurt you and trying to make life harder on you, but Jesus sees what could come after the sacrifice, and that's what he's interested in. That's what he's interested in. And so he's not afraid to ask for the sacrifice to get us there. And what we need to understand is this third point is that Jesus wants us to not only step out of the crowd, count the cost, but also to commit to the outcome. To commit to the outcome. This is the way he wraps up his message to the crowd. He said, therefore, anyone of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. He says, any of you who does not renounce all that you have, you cannot be my disciple. You got to stay in the crowd, but you can't be my disciple. You can sit and listen, but unless you renounce all that you have, you can't be my disciple. And the thing to know here is that Jesus isn't calling them to commit to the sacrifice of go ahead and sacrifice everything, sacrifice your family, throw away your job, throw away your money, throw away your time. He's not asking you to do that, but what he is saying is I want you to at least start off by renouncing it. And all that means is prioritizing Jesus above it and saying, Jesus, I love these aspects. I value these aspects of life. These are blessings that you have given me and poured out on me, but the biggest blessing I have is you. And so Jesus, come what may on this journey, if you ask me to give my time, I've already renounced it and said, so my answer is yes. Yes, I will give you my time. Jesus, if you ask me to benefit somebody else and to dig into my paycheck and to give towards somebody else, then the answer is yes, because I've already renounced it. He says, commit to the outcome. Be ready to give anything you have for Jesus and for his purposes. But I think the problem that we have is that we're so committed to the way that things are. That's where we've put our commitment in. We've put our commitment to maintaining what is. And Jesus says, I want you to commit to what could be. I want you to commit to what could be. We're like, this is what is, and this is the blessing, and I'm committed to this, and I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to hold it tighter, and I'm committed to it. And Jesus is like, but you got to see what could be still. And I think we get stuck between those two things of what is versus what could be. And on one hand, we're committed to what is, but at the same time, we know that where we are is painful as well, and we're unsatisfied with where we are. And then we see this vision of where Jesus is calling us to, of what could be, but we know that to get to what could be, we got to let go of what is. And here's the thing, I've got to ask you this question. Are you satisfied with what is? Are you satisfied with what is? Because if you're satisfied, then Jesus no longer needs anything of you. And you can remain in the crowd. Are you satisfied with the way things are in your home? Are you satisfied with the way things are in your city? Are you satisfied with the way things are in this culture and in this world? Because that's what is. And if so, then we can keep the status quo, and we don't have to step out of the crowd, and we don't have to commit to this. But I got to tell you, I'm not satisfied with the way that things are. You know, I look around our city, and I look around our homes. I look around my home and my family and my extended family. I'm like, man, Jesus, you got work to do. There's work to do still. We're not done yet. There's still people that don't know Jesus living right down the street from me. We're not done yet. I'm not satisfied with what is. There are still lost people in this city. There is still sin in this city. There is still brokenness in our city. And I'm not satisfied with what is. There are still people who have found Jesus, but they haven't actually started following him yet. There's way too many people in the crowd. And so I'm not satisfied with where we are yet. So then what Jesus asks us to do is to commit to what could be. And I got to tell you, my family is committed to what could be. And we're committed to what could be right here at Harvester Christian Church. You know, a few weeks ago, 4 weeks ago today, I got to become the lead pastor of Harvester Christian Church. And Doyle, I haven't burned the place down. So we're still here. That's good news, right? I thought all you would leave for sure. But as Doyle and I were walking through like those conversations, and like we had to count the cost, me and my family, because here's what I've done. I've seen Doyle lead and do a fabulous job. I've seen Ben lead and do a fabulous job, and I've seen the cost of following Jesus from that position. And I've seen, especially this last year, watching what Doyle has had to go through, where anything you do or anything you say, 50% of the crowd's going to try to stone you. And there's a cost with that. And see the heart that goes into that. And first off, just thank you so much, Doyle, for the way that you've carried your cross for Harvester Christian Church. But I also know it's not just a cost on Doyle, it's a cost on Jean as well, and Doyle's family. And as Rachel and I are stepping into this, we're like, man, do we want to step into that? We're kind of happy with the role we have, and we're kind of happy with what is. Man, what could be? What could be? And so our family was like, oh, let's jump in and do this. And there's a part of me that just wants to come to my wife and say, I'm sorry for what's going to come. And look at my girls and my son and say, man, I'm sorry for what's going to come. But man, I love Jesus. Man, and our family loves Jesus, and so we're committed. Like, Jesus, we renounce all things. Please don't take all things. But we renounce all things, and we're going to follow you, and we're committed. And it's not just me, it's our staff as well. It's our team as well. It's our elders as well. It's many of you who are demonstrating that time and time again that you're committed to what could be. And so before we step any farther into what could be at Harvester Christian Church, what could be in Troy, Missouri, and St. Louis, Ferguson, and St. Charles County, I got to ask, who here is ready to step out of the crowd and commit to what could be? And I'd like to know what your name is. I really would. I'd like to know, man, who are you? And so what we've done is we've given you a card that I'm going to ask you to just essentially with that card to raise your hand and say, I'm committing to a crazy faith. I'm committing to not just serving once. I'm committed not to just praying once. I'm committed to not just giving once. And I'm going to make the crazy commitment to say, I'm part of what may come at Harvester. I'm part of what may come in my own life. I'm part of what may come in the future of heaven coming to earth. And on that card, what I'm going to ask you to do is just let me know where you are and commit to maybe 3 things of serving regularly, praying regularly, and giving regularly. So I'm not asking you just to serve, pray, or give. I'm asking you, would you commit to being crazy and doing those things regularly and making them part of your relationship with Christ, of stepping out of the crowd and becoming a disciple? And if you're doing that for the first time, so for example, maybe you're not serving and you're going to say, you know what, today I'm going to start serving regularly. Maybe you came to Engage Our City and you served one time, but you're like, man, Jesus did something in my heart there. And I want to continue to pick up my cross and carry it daily and start serving. You can check that. Or maybe you're like, praying, I've been doing that. Like prayer is my thing, and I'm going to continue praying regularly here at Harvester Christian Church. Then check that. And then when it comes to giving, where are you on that? Have you started giving just one time? Or maybe you're like, man, I want to commit to starting to give regularly at Harvester Christian Church. Where are you on that? And what I'd love for you to do is to put your name at the bottom of it and let me know. And say, I'm not going to sit in the shadows and be a disciple, but I'm going to say I'm part of the team. And on the back of that is just some information where you can put some of your information on the back of that. Because what I'd love to do is just to write you a letter and say thank you. And to let you know that, man, we're in this together. And what God has for us, I have no clue, but I got a feeling it's going to be something big for his kingdom and not just ours. If you're online right now, we've got a link in the chat that you can click on that, and you can participate in this by doing the electronic one. But what I want to do right now is I want to give you some time to not just jump into the commitment. I hope that you'll pray over this first. And so we're just going to wrap up this message by giving you just a little bit of space to spend some time with Jesus, hearing him call you out of the crowd, hearing him call you to count the cost, and then hearing him ask you to commit to the outcome of what he's trying to do in this church, in this city, and in this world. And then you can fill that card out if you want to jump in, and then I'll tell you what to do with that card a little bit later. You can take this time now to pray.